Sam Alton, he said in 2 years, 95% of all marketing jobs will be gone because of AI. So clearly that has not happened either. I think that any business that isn't getting their content and site ready for AI is behind, because a lot of companies are doing it already. I am not the one that's building all of this wealth and building all of this profit. This is really a team effort. Once we go to an employee-owned company, like I really like about the model we're looking at is if you own a share, you have a vote, and everyone just has one vote, which I think is a really cool, method and idea.
Nick Footer, welcome to Eat Coffee with Experts.
Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. As the CEO and cultivator of happiness at Intuitive Digital, how do you keep a strong culture, especially with a global team?
Yeah, keeping that culture is hard. The pandemic pushed us from a full in-house team to a remote team. And very quickly, we saw that we had to kind of, I don't want to say force, but recommend and guide our team into filling up some of those places that you got when you were just in office, around the water cooler, going out to lunch, those types of things that you miss out being a remote team. And so we have a variety of mandatory or highly recommended meetings on our calendar every single week that the whole team goes to. We have a huddle every Monday. We have a chit chat on Thursday where we a lot of times play games. And then we also have something called donut dates. And so we use a software that connects two of our team members every 3 weeks. And they basically meet up and have a 30-minute conversation, maybe over a cup of coffee or, whatever they need, or with a donut.
Nice.
And so, it's interesting because we have these things that really are structured to build culture. And yet, like, we just had our annual fly-in here back in July. And one of the things that in talking to people more and more is like being remote and working from home, like people are lonely. And, that's not necessarily our culture, but so we have we've leaned in even further to engaging with each other and trying to build those relationships. So I think one of the last things too about culture is, even if you are remote, having some sort of hopefully annual get together where everyone flies in together, where you can spend 2 to 3, 4, 5 days together, building some of those relationships that you're going to need to fall back on when somebody gives you a deck that isn't very good, or when somebody has a baby, or when, whether it's good or bad, like you can, rise up together, and you need some of that, some of that time that you built together outside of just across the screen that has been really, really valuable for us.
Yeah. I mean, with building rapport like that, I find that it allows teams to work faster and give more direct feedback. The whole radical candor concept of care deeply, challenge directly. Do you have any other frameworks like radical candor, let's say, that are almost like guiding principles for your agency and for the culture?
Yeah, I was looking over to see if I have radical candor over here on my bookshelf, because that is a framework that we deployed about 5 years ago and have used pretty regularly. We, this last year, have taken a little bit of a step back away from it. We found is that radical candor, while you're in office, when you have that time between meetings, just like pull somebody's, it's way easier than when it's like a virtual environment where you have to set a meeting, or you have to like Slack them and say, hey, can you jump on a call? It felt for the team to be a bit challenging and difficult. And so we've pivoted a little bit off that, and we're going through actually like a 6. We hired a consultant, and we're changing kind of the name, and it's like constructive feedback. We're trying to get rid of kind of the edges of radical candor and just say, like, to put out great work, we have to be willing and able to challenge each other directly in a way that we're not taking offense, and that, all we're trying to do is put out the best product for our partner. And so, is there like a framework that we're using? We're actually kind of moving away from like the edge of a framework and just trying to push this idea and the principles, because at the end of the day, I think we try to hire people who both want to grow and are willing to help others grow. I think those are some of the things we look for. When that stalls out, work product stalls out, the success of our campaign stalls out. And in general, then we lose clients because we're not doing the best possible work we can.
Yeah.
So no framework that we're like totally into, but I loved radical candor. I love that idea. I think I think in general, people aren't great at giving feedback. That
Yeah.
isn't something that you like learn in school
Hmm.
and so I think as employers and as, business people, it's my job to try to help build those skills. And I was terrible at it myself.
Mm.
I'm me too. So, not saying I was great. And so me using those frameworks also, I think has made the company better.
Yeah, I love that. And you have a notoriously high retention rate for your employees. I would imagine that allowing a safe space, emotional safety for people to feel comfortable giving and receiving that feedback is one of those key contributing factors to why people stick around Intuitive Digital so long. The other thing that we were just talking about offline is what the future of Intuitive Digital is like. Like, what's the strategy? What I called it an exit plan, but tell us a little bit more about, what your perspective of how you're empowering employees to contribute to the company and then also reap the rewards.
Yeah. So I ran into this idea of employee ownership about 3 or 4 years ago. The thing that really connected deeply with me is that I am one of, at that point, I was like one of 22 people. That was kind of, we were almost at our largest size at that point. And it was a realization that like, I am not the one that's building all of this wealth and building all of this profit. This is really a team effort. And, I'm very much, I'm a Democrat, I'm a liberal. And so this idea of kind of shared wealth and spreading, the rewards of kind of our little society of sorts really connected deeply with me. And so it's never been an exit strategy idea. Some business owners will use employee ownership at the end of their career to kind of like, allow a company to continue on without them. And, that's not my view. I would really like to continue at Intuitive into the future. However, once we go to an employee-owned company, like I will just be one of 12 votes. And that's the other thing I really like about the model we're looking at is if you own a share, you have a vote, and everyone just has
Mm,
one vote,
mm,
which I think is a really cool, method and idea. So, you know, I could be voted off as CEO of this company that
mm.
we all built together if I'm not, towing the line, which I like. I like this idea of like of responsibility. And, I believe I've been a great caretaker of our organization. But if that
Mhm.
changes in the future, my butt's on the line just like everybody else's.
Yeah. Yeah. And you see that in bigger companies too, like Apple notoriously with Steve Jobs. He was, I believe, voted off or, voted off the island, right? And then he came back. Same thing with OpenAI not too long ago. Sam Altman left and then
Yes.
came back, right?
Yep.
So there is hope, maybe it's part of the divine plan that you get kicked off the island and then come back to just, create insane multiples for the company. I'm curious, part of being the CEO is casting that vision and like staying on top of trends. What sort of challenges do you have in the position that you're in now, which lead to downstream effects with the team either staying up to date or staying motivated? Like, what challenges are you seeing as the digital agency landscape changes from a leadership perspective?
I mean, I think from a leadership perspective, full transparency, I looked at AI with a little bit of hesitation at the beginning of
Hmm.
I wasn't sure if how much it was going to impact our industry.
Mm,
And now I think there are people that are still don't believe it's going to impact it really at all. It's just going to be a trend or that the government's going to come in and shut it all down due to privacy. Like I've read some stuff that's like, whoa, I just can't see the government shutting down this thing because
yeah.
even if the US stops all of their like China and all these other countries are going to continue on.
Yeah.
We can't stop, unfortunately. And then I've on the flip side, like Sam Altman, right, who said it was gonna, I think it was almost 2 years ago now, where he said in 2 years, 95% of all marketing jobs will be gone because of AI. So
Mm,
clearly that has not happened either.
yeah. Yeah.
And so for me as in the leadership role is trying to digest all of this information about how our industry is changing and planning and setting, a vision of where the company can be in 1, 3, and 5 years. We
Hmm.
run an operating system called EOS, the
Hmm.
Entrepreneurial Operating System. And so that framework actually is very helpful in setting
Hmm.
those kind of that vision of where we're going. And so that myself and my leadership team sit down on a quarterly and a yearly basis and review that and think about it and talk about it. And, I think that that vision then gets shared over and over and over in that system, which allows, our team members to hopefully get excited about the changes that are possible for them, whether that's, new positions, learning new things, getting paid more money,
Hmm.
many things that motivate different team members. But I think that, again, I was a little late, but we've quickly caught up. And now I feel like we're kind of on the edge of, we're deploying AI services. We're creating, not only involving them in our services, but literally we are, about to launch actual AI based marketing services, that are kind of leaning even further into, this, I don't want to call it a trend. It is a evolution of our
Hmm.
world that I think that we're currently in.
I would imagine that you do a lot of reading and consuming information to stay up to date with what is happening. And the employees would look to you to say, as a source of truth. Like we trust Nick's judgment. Like obviously he's the one who's in these meetings. He's closer to the primary sources for what's happening with the algorithms and the updates and everything like that. I'm curious what are your sources of truth for where you get your information, and like, who are your not role models, but like who do you listen to? Like, where do you stay up to date with the trends and what's happening?
Mm. uh, I mean, I do digest a lot of information, I think, and I couldn't even give you one specific source. I will say that and we were talking this off, like the Backlinkos, what I love their stuff, really deep research that they do. But Rand Fishkin, I think, is another great voice in our industry who talks a lot about how AI and just zero click searches, even before AI had started changing the way that the SERP is.
Hmm.
And so again, I'm on a lot of social media. I'm reading a lot of articles. I'm reading a lot of research. So to me, I try to dive into research whenever
Hmm.
possible, not just, I think in our industry and world, there's a lot of people, including us. I'm not saying that kind of regurgitate what's out there and stamp it themselves to share with their communities or with their partners. And I think that's valuable. But I think really trying to dive into those really big data sets, we're too small to, we're a 13-person agency in Portland, based out of Portland, Oregon. We can't run that million search result data analysis that some of these larger firms and softwares can run. So
Yeah.
I try to just digest as much as I can. And then, yeah, like you said, it's kind of trying to wade through what's real and what's fake. And, a lot of that's why I'm the CEO and Cultivator of
Yeah.
Happiness is
Yeah.
that's the job.
Yeah. You have to keep the peace. Like make sure everybody knows that it's okay. It's safe to be here. Like we're gonna work through this together, right? Yeah. With that being said, I would imagine that, to have a well functioning organization, people need to feel. I think there's a book called it's not Flow, but it's something by Daniel Pinkerton or Pinkman or something like that,
Mm.
where he talks about autonomy and a challenge, what keeps people around, what keeps them engaged in their job, in their organization. What kind of mechanisms do you have, or like feedback loops or listening strategies do you have internally? And then I would also posit that, how are you listening to your clients or your target market, and with internal, like what sort of feedback mechanisms or listening devices do you have?
Yeah. And you're talking specifically more about services or just in general, or?
I would say, like, you have the EOS framework. Is it baked into that, 360 feedback, that kind of stuff?
Yeah. So, I mean, from the team, yeah, we have the EOS which framework, which really is, I think, monumental. So we have something called level 10 meetings that are every other week in each of our services. And we're actually tinkering around with having an additional one that have all of our services together. Cause I know one of the
Mm,
things that I think that a lot of marketing agencies deal with are trying to make sure that their services aren't siloed
mm,
across, each specific service. But so we have these level 10s where people put issues. So anytime we're running into an issue or having a problem or wanting to test out a new software, they put it on, basically a list that we then cover together basically every 2 weeks. We also have, of course, like one-on-ones with managers. We have, as part of the EOS framework, we do a skip level meeting where team members get to talk to their boss's boss, which is either normally me
mm.
at this current
Yeah.
structure, and just talk about how things are going at the company and I also participate in donut dates. So that's another place where every 3 weeks I'm talking to somebody for 30 minutes, sit down, like, what's going on?
Nice.
What are you thinking? So there's a lot. And of course, we
Mm-hmm.
have Slack. We have those two weekly meetings where everyone's getting together and talking, and staff meeting where at the end of it, I literally will wait for 10 to 15 seconds. I'll say, okay, what problems do you have? What do you want to talk about? And
Mm.
we'll talk and we'll talk until nobody says anything. For that 10 seconds is long.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
bet.
but it's amazing what'll sometimes somebody will pipe up at 9 seconds, right? They're like, I'm in
Yeah.
10, I can't handle
Yeah.
the silence anymore.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot internally.
That's great. That's great.
With our partners, that's been something that has evolved. And over the last year, instead of just being reporting focused and sharing what we're seeing, we started
Mm-hmm.
layering in questions for them. So in every single one of our kind of monthly
Hmm.
or biweekly meetings, we're asking, how are sales, right? Because how are these, did you get 15 calls this week? Because one of the things that we're finding, and maybe this is a little bit of a hot take, but is especially on the ad side, is
Mm-hmm.
that it's what we're seeing is that there are a lot of conversions that are just not real people, or they're not
Mm.
real, whether they're bots or whether they're
Mm-hmm.
click farms. And so what we've seen is that a lot of our partners' conversions numbers are up and high, much higher than they were in years past, because we're
Mm-hmm.
using things like Performance Max and some of these Advantage Plus, on the meta side. And it's amazing how when you use these, like, wow, conversions are going up and up and up. But then when you actually dive into revenue and actual sales or those numbers are either even or even down sometimes.
Yeah.
And so as we started digging into that and asking some of those questions to our partners, are like, yeah, that's great that your spreadsheet shows that you got us all this stuff, but we're drowning here.
Yeah.
We're doing worse than last year. And so I think that's really important to not just rely on what analytics is telling you, but have that gut check with a business owner or with a marketing manager or CMO that says, how are things going?
Yeah.
That
What's the qualitative data?
Totally, because otherwise and this happened once or twice, which is kind of where this started is, we lost a couple of clients, and in their exit interviews, they're like, yeah, all your charts show great, but we're down revenue from last year. And
Mm.
so that's when we started asking and being a little bit more curious with our partners. And, we're still trying to solve that problem of,
Yeah.
because I think, unfortunately, with AI and all these paid platforms, especially, are pushing into these models where you don't have control anymore. And what they're showing you on paper is that it's much better campaign. It works much better. But in the
Mm-hmm.
business results side, it's not. And that's where I think agencies and consultants are going to be okay, is that it's
Yeah.
still going to be our job to make sure that the business case makes sense, and to make sure, okay, like, we want to spend X dollars with Google's AI and Y dollars with Meta's AI, and
Mm-hmm.
then make sure that that actually is turning into, revenue and profit, and some sort of, return on ad spend.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, again, just being curious with our partners and asking those questions that can be awkward, like, hey, how are we doing? And,
Yeah.
unfortunately this year, especially, a lot of people have, aren't doing that great in 2025. And,
Yeah.
I feel like the stock market and the real world market are going in two different directions right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It is interesting to be on the ground floor instead of just the news feed that shows the highlights. And you're right, man. Those are tough conversations to have. Like, y'all making money or yeah.
Right. Because if
Yeah.
not, then your butt's on the line. You have to go fix
Exactly.
it.
Exactly. So then I'm curious. So you mentioned a couple KPIs that used to matter in the past, like click through rates and calls booked and meetings booked. It sounds like now the key performance indicators that you're looking for are more like the tough conversations with the client of like, what's your revenue like? What's your client churn? Like, what's your qualification? Yeah, are the people qualified? How do you quantify like what's a qualified appointment, right? So how are you guys thinking about adapting to that where the SERPs are no longer showing just a bunch of blue links, they're showing AI overviews and all of that. What's your hot take there?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's two things. One, like, on the conversion side, we've had to push past metrics that used to matter and are now having to help our partners a lot of our, engagements are smaller businesses. They don't have CRMs. They don't have some of the
Mm,
things that some of our larger engagements do. And so we're having to help them figure out, and sometimes it's rudimentary, like it's a spreadsheet that form fills get dumped into that they can check off, was this good or bad? Which at least gives
yeah.
us some feedback on, is what we're doing working? You know,
Mhm.
our larger engagements having CRM data, and a lot of businesses don't want to hand the keys over to us, but we at least need to get some sort of reporting or some sort of loop that allows us. And so we're pushing really hard for that across kind of all of our engagements, and we pretty much have it now. On the, the AI overview side of things and
Mhm.
AI in general, how it's changing the SERPs, we have an AI checklist that we will either provide for free or that, as part of those new AI services we're talking about.
Mhm.
I think that any business that isn't getting their content and site ready for AI is behind. If they haven't already started, you're behind, because a lot of companies are doing it already. Some businesses and sites were just set up to do better in AI driven searches anyways.
Mhm.
And so what we're really trying to push and drive folks to, and my belief is that moving more into like user generated content instead
Mhm.
of just website content, all of these algorithms have all of the data. They have the entire internet. There's and that's why I think we've seen a lot of the models kind of plateau. There's no more training data.
Yeah.
So where I believe a lot of these, and as we move more into like intent, because a lot of AI answers still are more like general and high funnel. They're
Mhm.
not necessarily like find me a plumber in Portland.
Mhm.
My
Right.
belief is that because they're going to want to eat that space too, is that they're
Yeah.
going to be tying much more into reviews and like Reddit. And so we're pushing a lot of our folks. We were already big on reviews, but pushing them also into Reddit. AI overviews specifically in Google have a connection with Reddit data. And so like we see that if you have more content on Reddit, you're more likely to show up in AI overviews.
Mhm.
Same thing with like Wikipedia pages with ChatGPT. So there's a couple of these boxes that you can check that can help, organizations get, and to be served more in those overviews. And again, I think we're trying to help our partners get ahead of the game on kind of the more intent based searches by pushing really into that user generated content, because I think that's where those algorithms are going to take from to
Mhm.
then deliver back a result. Because if you think about it, whether it's ChatGPT or an AI overview or whatever, you're going to need to give them a result that they can count on. If they call that business,
Yeah.
you recommended it, they have to crush it for you. And the
Yeah.
only way they know if that's actually going to happen is by what are other people saying about their services.
Mhm.
And so that's why I think reviews just are going to continue to be, if anything, more important than ever in the past for those more like local businesses and kind of those intent based keywords.
And it opens up a cool opportunity for businesses as entities to engage with their audience even more. I mean, we
Yes.
may see the resurgence of actual social
Social.
platforms,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Instead of
Totally.
just LinkedIn, which is like, every 10th post is like an actual story, and the previous 9 are just like thought leadership with a CTA, you
Yeah.
right? For my free lead magnet. Yeah.
Totally.
That's interesting. So I guess, how are you guys thinking about omni-channel approach? Like, it's messy. How do you create content? How do you advise clients on like where to focus? There's two thoughts here, right? There's one that's like, be everywhere all the time, which is the omni-channel approach. But the other thought is, be everywhere that your audience is. And that's a much more nuanced approach. Yeah, I'm curious to hear your take.
Yeah. So we take more of the approach of be where your audience is. And
Mm-hmm.
so we normally try to do some audience research at the beginning of a lot of our engagements if they have the money for it, because
Mm-hmm.
that then allows us to target those specific platforms, those social channels. Sometimes it's, don't be on Meta. Sometimes it's be on Instagram, whatever those specific audience, points that we can pull out of that data. And it allows us to then spend our time and money more targeted and effectively.
Mm-hmm.
Our large engagements, I think the omni channel approach still works and still has value.
Mm-hmm.
But we pivoted actually down about a year and a half, 2 years ago now, because I saw this coming, right? Like I
Mm-hmm.
saw the big and mid-size companies are going to be using AI, are going to bring this in-house, and that's what they've really done. And so we really, although we still work with mid-sized organizations and love them and do great work for them, like we pivoted a lot of our services and lowered our retainers down to help work with small businesses again, because those are the folks that they don't have a marketing person. They don't know what to do. They don't know where to spend it. And so having that more focused approach, they don't have the money to do omnichannel. And so we're having really great success. And we moved away from that like siloed, you're going to do SEO with us, to we now sell digital marketing retainers that any of our team, depending on what their need that month is, right? We could go do a piece of content. We could go launch an ad campaign. We can, update their site with some schema and some other stuff that needs to happen for AIO reviews. So it gives us more flexibility instead of in the past. We were very siloed and like, yep, you're going to do SEO with us. And we still have some folks that are like that. But, a lot of the new stuff that we're getting in is a little bit more broad. And we try to, talk to them about this is like, our world is changing every single day, and you don't want just to be handcuffed into one service. You want to let us as the expert help and guide you to what's going to make you the most money, or get those the most legitimate leads that we can get you as quickly as possible.
Yeah. And that opens up, I think it gives confidence to agency owners who are even newer. I guess it doesn't matter how long they've been running an agency, but there's kind of a threat, it might seem, that since the barrier to entry and the ease of access to AI tools and programs, like it's getting easier and easier to use, what relevance will an agency have if a brand can just hire people who now can create content like that and, source? Yeah, there's all kinds of threats to the agency model, but I think you're making a great point here where it's not about who can access the tools and who can use the tools and who understands AI. It is still about strategy and being nimble enough to adapt and have the resources to, to diversify into different niches and into different platforms is the competitive advantage.
Yep, exactly.
For the future.
Yep, I couldn't agree more.
I love that. So as we wrap up here, Nick, where can people find you online? Where can they learn more about Intuitive Digital?
Yeah, so you can find us at intuitivedigital.com, of course. And then we put out a lot of content both on Instagram and LinkedIn. I'm sure it's a bunch of thought leadership and calls to action.
Dude, I'm on the same thing. I was kind of making a dig at that, but I'm doing the same thing.
Yeah, so you can find us there. I'm on LinkedIn. I love connecting with people. So please do send me a connect request and we can keep conversations going there.
Cool. And download the lead magnets from Nick.
Yes. Download our AI checklist. Yeah, it's a good one.
Nice. Yeah. You know what? Last note here. I was just on a call with our content team about specifically that, and I was sharing resources in the chat. And I noticed like 2 out of the 3 resources that I shared were lead magnets from people that I follow on LinkedIn. And I was like, yeah. I mean,
there's good stuff out there still.
Exactly. And those lead magnets that I shared with them actually turned into some sort of business relationship with the people who provided those. So yeah, even though I can make digs at it, but it works. It works. Awesome. Nick Footer, thank you for being here.
It was a pleasure. Thanks for having me.